The Galactic Empire's official broadcast echoed across the settled systems, a declaration of final victory. They had crushed the last human colony. They displayed the charred remains of human cities, showing shattered schools, hospitals reduced to ash, and the broken bodies of women and children as trophies. The Empire's spokesperson called it a necessary cleansing, a tactical strike to prevent the resurgence of a dangerous death world species. They celebrated not just the elimination of combatants, but the systematic eradication of an entire generation. The broadcasts were relentless, parading the images of human infants, unarmed civilians, and desperate mothers as proof of the Empire's dominance. The Empire's message was clear. Resistance was futile. Submission was survival. Survivors' final transmissions, intercepted by distant listening posts, painted a horror the Empire tried to suppress. Desperate cries from a father who had watched his children gunned down. A mother's panicked plea for a rescue ship that would never come. The messages were cut off mid-sentence, some ending in screams, others in abrupt static. Entire colonies silenced. Medical vessels targeted. Relief ships blasted from orbit. The Empire did not simply win a battle. They extinguished life with surgical cruelty. The wider galaxy reacted with a fractured response. Minor species condemned the act, but lacked the strength to challenge the Empire. The powerful factions remained silent, calculating their gains, fearing that opposing the Empire would bring war to their own borders. The Galactic Council convened, not to seek justice, but to draft a statement that would prevent further conflict. They ruled the issue resolved, a closed chapter. The extermination of human civilians would not provoke sanctions. The galaxy turned away. The woman general responsible for the massacre became the symbol of the Empire's brutal efficiency. She delivered a speech that reverberated through every Empire control system. She claimed that eradicating the young was not an act of savagery, but a strategic necessity. Her words were cold, calculated. A species that breeds rebellion from the cradle must have its cradle destroyed. She made it clear this was no accident, no collateral damage. It was deliberate, premeditated genocide. She spoke without hesitation, her authority absolute, her belief in the Empire's supremacy unshaken. Scattered human refugees fled to the edges of controlled space, surviving on derelict ships, hidden asteroid fields, and abandoned mining stations. Human survivors became ghosts, slipping past border patrols, communicating through encrypted signals. The Empire believed them broken, scattered remnants clinging to the last shreds of their species. Reports of human activity were dismissed as irrelevant. A few small raids, some stolen supplies, insignificant in the face of an Empire's might. The truth was far more dangerous. Survivors were not fleeing. They were converging. Across forgotten channels, ancient human networks sparked to life. Messages pulsed through buried relays. Old war protocols resurfaced. Human captains who had buried their ships in asteroid belts decades prior resurfaced, answering the call. The silence that had followed the massacre was not surrender. It was the gathering of a storm. The galaxy's smaller powers debated quietly. There were whispers that the humans had not been fully exterminated, that they were not retreating, but preparing. Some species attempted to distance themselves from the Empire. Others fortified their borders, uncertain whether they would become collateral in whatever came next. The woman general dismissed the rumors. To her, the war was over. She had broken the human colonies, silenced their cries, annihilated their ability to fight. She ordered her forces to focus on new campaigns, pushing into resource-rich sectors. She no longer spared a thought for the scattered refugees and disarmed survivors she had left behind. But humans were not planning to survive. They were planning revenge. The first coordinated transmissions between the remaining human ships carried no battle plans, no requests for assistance. They carried a promise. We heard what you did to our children. We're coming. The message was transmitted on open channels, encoded but meant to be cracked. It was a deliberate warning, a psychological strike intended to pierce through the Empire's arrogance. The survivors began moving with precision. Human cells spread across neutral space, reactivating dormant supply caches, and rediscovering ancient weapons buried beneath long-forgotten outposts. Old warships, thought lost, were pulled from hiding and slowly reassembled by human engineers working in silence. The few remaining military strategists emerged from exile, rebuilding fragmented command structures. The human network, invisible to the Empire's surveillance, expanded without detection. Smaller species that had once feared human aggression now chose to assist in secret, not because they wished to fight, but because they had witnessed what the Empire had done and understood that if humans fell, the Empire's genocidal reach would find new targets. These species offered refuge, technology, and intelligence. They understood that humanity's survival was now the only barrier between them and future extermination. The Galactic Council's complacency began to crack. Reports of human ship sightings in restricted zones, supply depots mysteriously vanishing, border patrols failing to report back. These fragments painted a picture the Council refused to acknowledge. They insisted the war was over. They clung to the belief that humans could not rebuild, could not strike back, could not survive the crushing blow of genocide. But unease spread. The woman general continued to ignore the warning signs. Her career had been built on decisive action, on unquestioned supremacy. She had exterminated species before. None had ever returned. Humans, she believed, were no different. She declared publicly that any remaining human activity would be extinguished, that her forces would erase every last ember. Her overconfidence blinded her to the subtle movements forming in the shadows. Survivor cells infiltrated the Empire's outer infrastructure. They did not attack directly. They listened. They mapped supply routes, tracked fleet movements, and studied the Empire's weaknesses with clinical patience. The Empire's communications were penetrated by human operatives who no longer cared to mask their digital signatures. They left traces deliberately, psychological markers that unsettled Imperial commanders. Human-coded phrases like "we remember" appeared in supposedly secure channels, their origins untraceable. Humanity was not seeking conquest. They were not attempting to reclaim lost colonies or negotiate for reparations. Their objectives were singular: retribution. The death of every child would be answered. The destruction of every family would be avenged. The obliteration of their future would be paid for in imperial blood. The Empire dismissed the initial assaults as minor rebellions, isolated acts of desperation from a species already declared extinct. Their commanders refused to believe that scattered refugees could organize anything beyond token resistance. Patrol fleets continued standard operations, ignoring reports of missing convoys and abandoned stations. Empire logistics suffered minor disruptions, but no one connected the incidents. The Empire's arrogance prevented them from seeing the pattern until it was too late. Human strikes intensified. Empire supply lines collapsed in critical sectors. Fuel depots detonated in synchronized explosions across distant systems, timed to cripple frontline fleets. The Empire's most heavily fortified garrisons began receiving false resupply orders, lured into traps, their escorts obliterated. The attacks were precise, executed with such surgical efficiency that Empire analysts were forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. These were not desperate humans. These were trained tacticians, soldiers operating under a unified command structure with an intelligence network the Empire had failed to detect. Human psychological warfare unfolded with terrifying mastery. Empire ships began discovering abandoned stations where the only signs of life were messages scrawled on walls, written in human dialects, always the same: "You will never be safe." Captured surveillance footage from these stations showed no attackers, only systems shutting down in sequence, power grids failing, life support collapsing with exacting precision. Empire commanders struggled to contain the growing terror among their crews. Entire battalions requested reassignment, fearing the unseen enemy who could strike and vanish without leaving bodies behind. The woman general responded with escalation. She ordered massive search and destroy operations, committing entire fleets to hunting the human cells. She expanded surveillance protocols, sanctioned invasive scans of neutral territories, and deployed sensor grids around suspected human safe zones. But no matter how far she reached, the humans were always one step ahead. Her fleets encountered debris fields where battles had already ended, found traces of human activity that evaporated before pursuit could begin. Human operatives infiltrated Empire data cores, leaving behind carefully planted messages that reached directly into the minds of high-ranking officers. The phrase "we heard their screams" began to surface in system logs, battle reports, even personal devices. Officers awoke to find a message etched into their interfaces, broadcast in quiet, monotone voices over private channels. Paranoia spread faster than official containment measures. Crew morale deteriorated. Some captains abandoned missions mid-route. Others activated emergency self-destruct protocols at the mere suggestion of human presence. The woman general dismissed these incidents publicly, but her command structure began to fracture. She replaced subordinates she suspected of cowardice, issued death penalties for those who spread fear, and demanded absolute loyalty. Her attempt to restore discipline failed to counter the growing realization that the Empire's traditional tactics were useless against an enemy who never engaged directly, never announced their positions, and never allowed capture. Human fleets materialized in abandoned sectors, emerging from derelict shipyards the Empire had long forgotten. The vessels were not pristine. They were patched, modified beyond recognition, heavily armored with salvage plating, and bristling with weapon systems that defied standard configurations. Human engineers had rebuilt their ships with whatever they could steal, and their improvisation rendered them unpredictable and deadly. Empire patrols sent to intercept these fleets rarely returned. Those who did describe battles that felt more like executions than engagements. Human ships did not exchange warning shots. They struck with overwhelming force, targeting critical systems, disabling engines and life support within seconds. They spared civilians, but military personnel were given no quarter. In the rare cases where Empire crews managed to abandon ship, they found themselves rescued not by human forces, but by neutral species, delivering a simple message from humans. Tell them we remember. Empire shipyards located deep within secured territories began to suffer unexplained failures. Power surges crippled production lines, munitions depots detonated spontaneously, and docked vessels activated self-destruct sequences without command input. Investigations revealed that the humans had infiltrated shipyard control networks months before, waiting for the perfect moment to collapse them from within. The simultaneous destruction of multiple production hubs sent shockwaves to the Empire's military structure. Supply shortages crippled deployment schedules. Reinforcements failed to arrive at critical fronts. Entire campaigns ground to a halt. The woman general attempted to recover control by reinforcing core sectors, withdrawing from outlying territories to consolidate her forces. But the humans anticipated her strategy. They struck retreating fleets in transit corridors, using mine routes and artificial gravitational traps to immobilize vessels. Empire warships found themselves isolated, forced into kill zones where human forces disabled them with methodical precision. The galaxy's neutral factions, initially hesitant to involve themselves, began covertly supporting the human resurgence. Independent traders funneled supplies to human cells. Intelligence brokers sold fleet movement data at discounted rates, quietly aligning themselves with the inevitable victors. Even factions once allied with the Empire began to question their positions. They had witnessed the systematic eradication of human children. Now, they witnessed the terrifying efficiency of a human response. The woman general's desperation deepened. She authorized experimental weapons, conscripted additional fleets, and expanded propaganda campaigns designed to dehumanize the survivors. Empire-controlled media declared the humans as irrational aggressors, framing the counterattacks as unjustified terrorism. But the propaganda failed to resonate. The galaxy had seen the massacre. They had witnessed the Empire's own celebrations, the triumphant broadcast that had paraded the corpses of children. The lie could not overwrite the memory. Human transmissions continued, carefully timed to follow major attacks. They did not broadcast demands. They did not negotiate. Each message was a grim reminder. You declared victory over our children. We declare your extinction. The Empire's intelligence agencies attempted to trace these signals but failed repeatedly. Each message was bounced through abandoned relays, obsolete satellites, and repurposed civilian communication arrays. The humans had weaponized the infrastructure the Empire had long neglected. The woman general began purging her own ranks, convinced that human collaborators existed within her command structure. She replaced seasoned officers with loyalists who lacked experience, further destabilizing operational effectiveness. Multiple missions collapsed due to leadership failures, miscommunications, and internal sabotage. Her paranoia blinded her to the coordinated precision with which the humans dismantled her empire. Human cells employed tactics that the Empire could neither predict nor counter. Human forces tightened their grip with ruthless efficiency. Empire strongholds that once dominated entire sectors now stood vulnerable, isolated, and defenseless. Human fleets controlled the trade routes, the supply lines, and the transit corridors. The Empire's communication networks, fragmented and crippled, no longer provided reliable intelligence. Human operatives systematically dismantled remaining surveillance systems, shutting down early warning arrays, jamming distress frequencies, and leaving Empire garrisons blind to approaching threats. Human captains ignored surrender signals, bypassing stranded outposts, conserving resources for strategic targets. Their focus remained unwavering, complete, and irreversible dismantling of the Empire's war machine. Empire garrisons faced starvation as supply convoys were intercepted or destroyed before arrival. Desperation forced Empire soldiers to raid civilian populations for sustenance, further eroding their crumbling legitimacy. The Empire's own civilians began fleeing their territories, seeking refuge among neutral factions who quietly accepted them, aware that the collapse was inevitable. Rumors spread of Empire commanders abandoning their posts, defecting, or vanishing without explanation. Human pressure broke the chain of command at every level. Human fleets advanced methodically. They destroyed weapon factories, crippled fuel refineries, and dismantled orbital shipyards. They left civilian structures untouched, sending a clear message. This was not indiscriminate slaughter. It was targeted, deliberate retribution. The pattern was undeniable. Military targets were eradicated without hesitation. Civilian sectors remained unscathed. Even Empire civilians began to recognize that their own leadership had brought this destruction upon them. The woman general's attempts to consolidate surviving forces failed. Every rallying point she established was compromised. Every safe route was intercepted. Human ships moved like shadows, appearing in places the Empire believed secure, striking with precise coordination, then vanishing before pursuit could be mounted. Empire fleets found themselves ambushed at predetermined escape vectors, boxed in by gravitational anomalies engineered by human strategists. The woman general could no longer predict her enemy's movements. She could no longer trust her own intelligence. Neutral factions that had once feared the Empire now publicly withdrew their support. Former allies signed treaties with human representatives, offering transit access, supply caches, and intelligence in exchange for non-aggression assurances. These factions no longer viewed the Empire as the galactic superpower. They viewed humanity as the enforcers of an inevitable justice, a force that no longer needed diplomacy to assert dominance. The Empire's desperation reached its peak. Remaining commanders proposed unconditional surrender. They dispatched envoys with pleas for mercy, offers of full disarmament, territorial concessions, reparations, anything to halt the human advance. The humans did not acknowledge the envoys. They did not negotiate. Their silence was calculated, absolute. The message was clear. The time for bargaining had passed. Human fleets accelerated their offensive, deploying coordinated strikes across multiple sectors simultaneously. Empire fortresses collapsed under relentless bombardments, their defensive grids systematically neutralized. Human cyber warfare units penetrated remaining defense networks, turning automated turrets against their operators, disabling shield generators moments before impact strikes. Empire command structures disintegrated under the weight of cascading defeats. The woman general's fleet, once a symbol of imperial might, now operated in isolation, encircled by human warships that refused to engage directly. Her fleets were starved of resources, abandoned by central command, and beset by internal mutiny. Officers questioned her orders. Sailors deserted. Entire divisions surrendered preemptively to avoid inevitable destruction. The general's former allies refused to answer her calls for assistance. Her name became a curse among her own people. Human captains coordinated the final phase of the offensive with unspoken precision. They dismantled the Empire's remaining communication hubs, severed transit gates, and collapsed logistical centers. Empire fleets trapped within their own territories could no longer coordinate counterattacks or receive resupply. Each isolated unit became an easy target for precision strikes. Human forces exploited every weakness, every oversight, every failure the Empire's arrogance had bred over generations. Empire civilians, once supporters of the genocide, now beg for human mercy. They offer intelligence, sabotage their own defense systems, and broadcast secret locations of remaining Empire assets. The humans spared them without fanfare. Their objectives remained focused: destroy the instruments of genocide, dismantle the structures of oppression, and erase the symbols of imperial power. The woman general attempted one final counteroffensive, rallying her remaining ships for a direct engagement against a human fleet stationed near a critical relay hub. Her forces arrived to find the human vessels already in position, having predicted her route, her timing, and her tactics. The battle ended before it truly began. Empire ships were disabled with precision strikes that crippled engines and life support. Human ships disabled weapon systems and left the Empire crews stranded in lifeless hulls. The general's flagship was spared but left powerless, surrounded by human warships that maintained silent formation without delivering the final blow. She transmitted surrender messages across all known frequencies, pleading for negotiation, for the chance to explain, to offer concessions, to avoid annihilation. The humans did not respond. They allowed her to drift, her fleet dead in space, her communications echoing into silence. Her desperation grew. She transmitted personal appeals, invoking ancient codes of honor, begging to be heard. The silence persisted. The final blow did not come from the human fleets, but from within. Her remaining officers mutinied, seizing control of her flagship, disabling her command authority, and broadcasting a message of unconditional surrender directly to the human captains. The humans still did not respond. They transmitted a single file to the captured ship, a list of names. The names of the children killed during the initial massacre, each name meticulously catalogued, each life accounted for. The mutinous officers surrendered themselves to the humans, accepting detainment. The woman general was left alone, stripped of power, abandoned by her crew, and encircled by the silent threat of human warships that still refused to speak. Her isolation became absolute. The silence suffocated her. The weight of her choices crushed her. She transmitted desperate confessions, recounting her justifications, her calculations, her belief in the necessity of genocide. The humans never answered. Human fleets advanced toward the Empire's capital sectors, meeting no resistance. The Empire's remaining leadership, fractured and desperate, declared unilateral capitulation, dissolving imperial command structures in a desperate attempt to preserve fragments of their territories.